Ahoy, guys, it's Mrs. Klein.
Welcome back. It's Mrs. Wolbrin. We're going to continue with our podcast. We're going to be talking about, we're starting with section 4. So if you want to follow along in your book, we're on page 124. And just a reminder of your guiding question: how was the Continental Army able to win the war for independence from Great Britain?
Yeah, last time we were talking about some of our strengths and weaknesses and some of Great Britain's strengths and weaknesses. So Here we go. We were in dire straits.
Yes. Now, by the end of 1776, the British also thought that the war was just about over. General Howe offered to pardon all rebels who signed a statement promising to remain in peaceful obedience to the king.
Obedience. There you go.
Yeah. And thousands took him up on that offer.
Oh, my goodness. Amazing. Okay. All right. The crisis. Washington knew that he had to do something quickly. Gathering his last troops together, he read to them from Thomas Paine's new pamphlet, The Crisis. These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of their country, but he that stands it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman.
And next, after reading that to his men, Washington outlined a daring plan to attack Hessian troops who were camped for the winter in Trenton, New Jersey.
Late on December 25th, 1776, Washington's army crossed the ice-choked Delaware River in small boats. When the Americans reached Trenton, they found the Hessians happily sleeping off their Christmas feasts. Probably a little drinking there too, I'd imagine. Caught completely by surprise, the mercenaries surrender.
News of Washington's victories electrified patriots. We had been needing a victory.
We definitely needed that win.
Okay, and the tide begins to turn at this point. When the American Revolution began, both sides adopted the same military strategy, or strategy as an overall plan for winning the war. The strategy was to defeat the enemy in one big battle. After barely escaping from his loss in New York, Washington revised his strategy. In the future, he wrote Congress, he would avoid large battles that might put his army at risk. Instead, the war would be defensive, meaning that rather than defeating the British, Washington hoped to tire them out.
Yeah, I remember him having really great success with knowing when it was time to cut and run and get away and then come back on another day.
And he had a nickname, the Master of Retreat.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. The British also come up with a new strategy. Germain revised the British strategy as well by plotting to divide the rebels by taking control of New York's Hudson River Valley. To carry out this plan, General John Burgoyne left Canada in June 1777 with about 8,000 British soldiers and American Indian warriors. He planned to move this army south to Albany, New York. There he would meet up with General Howe, who was supposed to march his army north from New York City.
Okay. Now, there were some problems with Burgoyne's plan. There were two big problems with Burgoyne's plan in particular. The first was that what looked like an easy invasion route on a map was anything but easy. Yeah, you got to look at those.
Yeah, exactly. Those little
marks, those little lines.
Those little lines, yep.
Yeah, not that they had it at that time. The second problem with Burgoyne's plan was that General Howe had his own ideas about how to win the war. Instead of marching to Albany, Howe headed for the rebels' capital at Philadelphia, where he hoped to lure Washington into another major battle. Howe also hoped it would be the last one.
All right. This is a turning point, you guys, for us. By the time the slow-moving Burgoyne finally reached Saratoga Springs on the Hudson River, the area was swarming with militia. On October 17th, 1777, Burgoyne accepted defeat. Burgoyne's surrender marked a turning point in the war for the Americans.
And not long after this victory, France came into the war as an ally of the United States by sending money, weapons, troops, and warships to the Americans. With Spain also entering the war against Great Britain, the American cause no longer looked quite so hopeless.
Yeah, as soon as those people realized that there was a chance that we were going to win, they decided to get on board and get on our side. All right, but then Washington and his men have to suffer a winter at Valley Forge. Okay, the battles of Saratoga were a stunning victory, but the war was far from over. While General Washington's army roamed the countryside, Howe's forces still occupied Philadelphia. Late in 1777, Congress declared a day of Thanksgiving for the Army's successes. By this time, Washington and his army were on their way to Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, to make camp for the winter. Joseph Martin, our friend from earlier, described the Army's celebration.
Yes. We had nothing to eat for 2 or 3 days previous. But we must now have what Congress said a sumptuous or lavish Thanksgiving. It gave each and every man a gill, a few ounces of rice, and a tablespoon of vinegar. The army was now not only starved, but naked. The greatest part were not only shirtless and barefoot, but destitute or without any other clothing, especially blankets.
And this is the middle of winter, you guys.
Yeah.
It's not back in Pennsylvania. All right. To help lift his men from their misery, Washington put Baron Frederick von Steuben in charge of training. A military officer from Prussia in modern-day Germany, von Steuben arrived in December of 1777 and set to work turning the Continental Army into an organized fighting force.
Another foreign volunteer, the Marquis de Lafayette, also helped raise the troops' spirits. Although he was one of the richest men in France, Lafayette chose to share the hardships of Valley Forge, even using his own money to buy the men warm clothing. The patient fortitude or courage of the officers and soldiers, Lafayette wrote, was a continual miracle.
When at last spring arrived, Washington received news that the British were about to abandon Philadelphia. The time had come to put his newly trained army to the test.
Now it was Washington's turn to chase an army across New Jersey. And he caught up with the retreating British near Monmouth.
Monmouth, yep.
Okay, thank you. On June 28th, 1778, in the battle that followed, Washington seemed to be everywhere, constantly rallying his men to stand and fight, cheering them by his voice and example, wrote Lafayette. Never had I beheld so superb a man.
I'm going to end this podcast right now, you guys. It's quitting time.
And we'll talk to you soon.